My name is Ethan, and until a few months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. At 35, I had a stable job in a mid-sized tech company, a comfortable home in the suburbs, and a wife I'd been married to for 7 years. Her name was Claire, beautiful, confident, and the kind of woman who could light up a room with just her presence. I used to think she was my partner in everything. My rock, my safe place. Life wasn't without its ups and downs, but we always made it through, or so I believed. Over the last year, though, something had shifted. Claire had been spending more evenings working late. Her phone glued to her hand, her laughter a little too private when she texted. I brushed it off at first. We were adults. She deserved her space, and I trusted her completely. My birthday was coming up, my 35th. We didn't usually do big celebrations, but I was looking forward to a small dinner with a few close friends and family. I imagined coming home from work to find the house decorated. Claire smiling, maybe a cake waiting on the table. She had been oddly quiet about the plans, but I thought maybe she was going for a surprise. The day of my birthday was crisp and sunny. I left work a little early, excited for the evening ahead. On the drive home, I thought about the life we'd built, the mortgage we were almost done paying off, the trips we'd taken, the silly inside jokes that no one else understood. I didn't know it then, but that drive would be the last time I felt truly safe in my marriage. When I walked to the front door, the smell of food greeted me. The dining table was set, candles flickering, and Claire was dressed to perfection, a deep red dress I'd always loved on her. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed her phone on the table, screen lighting up again, and again with messages she didn't check. Guests began to arrive. We poured drinks, made small talk, and for a brief moment, I convinced myself the tension I felt was in my head. I told myself that whatever was going on with Claire, we'd talk it out later. I didn't realize I was standing on the edge of the most humiliating moment of my life, and it was about to happen in front of everyone I cared about. I stayed in the hallway for a few seconds, gripping the banister like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My ears were ringing, my chest tight. From the dining room, the muted sound of conversation returned, awkward, hesitant, like people were trying to pretend nothing had just happened. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, but my hands were shaking so badly I nearly spilled it. I didn't even drink it. I just stood there, staring at the counter, hearing my own thoughts spin in circles. She left me. She left me for someone else. She did it on my birthday. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps. Jake appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd just watched a train wreck. "Ethan, man, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to tell everyone to leave?" I nodded without speaking. My voice felt trapped somewhere in my throat. Jake squeezed my shoulder and went back into the dining room. Within minutes, I heard chairs scraping, murmur goodbyes, and the shuffled people putting on coats. One by one, they left. Some glanced at me with sympathy. Others avoided my eyes entirely. Claire didn't say a word to me. She just moved upstairs, heels clicking against the hardwood. When the house was finally quiet, I went to the living room and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed with a flood of messages from my mom, my cousin, even coworkers who'd somehow already heard. Everyone wanted to know if I was okay. I didn't reply. Around 10 p.m., Claire came downstairs with a small suitcase. She was wearing jeans and a coat, her hair pulled back. "I'll come by tomorrow for the rest of my things," she said flatly. "Where are you going?" I asked, though I already knew. "To his place," she said without hesitation. "I think it's best if we don't speak for a while." I wanted to shout, to demand answers, to ask how long she'd been betraying me, but the words stuck. Instead, I just stood there as she walked out the front door and closed it behind her. The moment she was gone, the silence in the house was unbearable. Every creak of the walls felt amplified. I wandered into the dining room, where the remnants of my birthday dinner sat untouched. The candles had burned down to stubs, wax spilling onto the tablecloth. My plate was still there, half-filled, the food now cold. I sat down and stared at it for a long time. Then, without realizing it, I started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, steady stream of tears. I didn't cry for Claire. I cried for the years I'd invested, for the trust I'd given, for the man I had been that morning who thought his life was whole. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every strange look, every late-night work meeting, every moment she had turned away from me in bed. The puzzle pieces I had ignored for months clicked into place with cruel precision. By sunrise, the grief had burned down into something colder, sharper. It wasn't enough to just survive this. She had humiliated me in front of everyone I loved, and she had done it without remorse. And now, she had to face the consequences. The next morning, I was still on the couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes, staring blankly at the ceiling when my phone buzzed. It was Jake. "You up?" he texted. I replied with one word. Yet a moment later, he called. His voice was low, like he didn't want anyone to overhear. "Ethan, I know who she's with." I sat up, rubbing my face. I already figured it's some guy from her office. Jake hesitated. "It's worse than that. It's Daniel." It took a second for the name to register. Daniel, my boss, my married boss, the man who had given me my first big promotion, who shook my hand at company parties, who once told me, "You're like family here." I felt my stomach twist. "You're kidding." "I wish I was," Jake said. "A buddy of mine saw them together last month at that new rooftop bar downtown. They weren't exactly hiding it. I didn't say anything because I didn't have proof until now. It all came rushing back to strange looks Daniel had been giving me lately, the way he'd suddenly started needing Claire's input for work events, the last-minute schedule changes that kept me from certain meetings. I'd been walking into a trap, without even knowing it. Jake's voice broke into my thoughts. "Ethan, you can't let this slide. The guy's not just screwing with your personal life. He's your boss. That's a whole different level of betrayal." I hung up feeling like the walls of my life were closing in. Not only had my wife been cheating, but she'd been doing it with someone who held direct power over my career. Every late night, every business dinner, it had been happening right under my nose. I checked my phone again. Social media was already buzzing with hints and whispers. Claire had posted a photo on her Instagram story. 2 wine glasses on a table, her hand resting on top of someone else's. She hadn't tagged him, but I knew that watch, Daniel's expensive silver Omega. Humiliation turned to fury. I stood up, grabbed a notebook, and started writing down everything I could remember. Dates, odd behavior, conversations, times Claire had been working late with Daniel. I pulled up old bank statements and spotted charges at restaurants we'd never been to together, charges made on our joint credit card. By the time I was done, I had a small pile of evidence sitting on the coffee table. But evidence was just the start. I didn't want to just end this marriage. I wanted to take back my dignity and make sure both Claire and Daniel understood the price of betraying me. I knew this wasn't going to be about shouting matches or drunken confrontations. No, if I was going to do this, it would be clean, precise, and devastating. The first step was to protect myself legally. That meant a call to a divorce attorney. And not just any attorney. I wanted the best in town, someone who wouldn't just represent me, but fight for me. As I made that call, I realized something. The sadness I'd felt last night was gone, replaced entirely by a cold, methodical resolve. Claire thought she had won. Daniel thought he had me cornered. They were both about to find out just how wrong they were. The divorce attorney I called, Margaret Doyle, had a reputation for being ruthless in court. She listened quietly as I explained everything, from Claire's public humiliation of me on my birthday to the affair with my boss. When I finished, there was a short pause on the line. "Mr. Turner," she said in a voice that was calm but carried an edge, "you are sitting on a gold mine of leverage. We're going to make sure she walks away with nothing she doesn't deserve, and maybe even less than that." I felt a flicker of satisfaction for the first time since Claire's announcement. Margaret advised me to take 3 immediate steps. 1. Freeze all joint bank accounts and credit cards. 2. Secure all important documents, house deed, investment accounts, retirement funds. 3. Collect any evidence of the affair, especially if company resources were involved. By noon that day, I had done all 3. Claire's access to money was gone. Every password was changed. The safe deposit box was emptied of anything valuable. Next, I started thinking about Daniel. The man had betrayed me personally and professionally, and I wasn't going to let him walk away clean. I combed through months of bank and credit card statements. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Dinners at high-end restaurants billed to the company, hotel stays during business conferences, even airline tickets. All of it tied to the same time frames Claire had been working late. I made copies of every statement, every receipt, every incriminating text Claire had left on her laptop. She hadn't even bothered to delete her messages. One thread in particular made my blood boil. Daniel, your husband's going to be so mad when he finds out you've been spending his money to spoil me. Claire, by then it won't matter. We'll be long gone. That was the final push I needed. I typed up a resignation letter, but not the polite 2-week notice kind. This one detailed Daniel's inappropriate relationship with my wife, his misuse of company funds, and attached the evidence. I copied the company's board of directors, the CFO, and HR. When I hit send, I imagined the chaos that email would cause. But I wasn't done. Margaret suggested we file for divorce immediately, citing adultery and emotional cruelty, backed by the public nature of Claire's actions. In our state, that gave me a significant advantage in property division. Since the house was in my name before the marriage, she had no claim to it. The joint savings, now frozen, would be handled by the court, but her access was cut off until then. To make sure she felt the pinch, I also canceled her phone plan, it was under my name, and removed her from my health insurance. Petty? Maybe. But after what she'd done, I didn't care. That night, I poured myself a drink, sat back on the couch, and looked around the house. It felt different, not empty, but mine again. For the first time in days, I wasn't drowning. I was steering the ship. The trap was set. Claire had no money. Daniel's career was about to go up in flames, and all I had to do now was wait. For the next few days, I kept my phone on silent and ignored every unknown number that popped up. I knew exactly who was trying to call Claire, Daniel, and maybe even a few mutual friends who hadn't heard my side of the story yet. I didn't need to speak to them. The storm I'd set in motion was doing all the talking for me. By the end of the week, word spread to my company like wildfire. Daniel had been placed on indefinite leave pending an internal investigation. I knew what that meant. He was finished. The board didn't take kindly to executives misusing company funds, especially when it involved personal affairs with employee spouses. I heard through Jake that Daniel's wife had also found out. Apparently, she'd gotten an anonymous package in the mail containing copies of the same receipts and messages I'd sent to HR. I hadn't sent it, but I had a pretty good guess who did. Probably one of the board members who wanted him gone without a fight. As for Claire, her life began crumbling almost immediately. Without access to our joint accounts, she was relying entirely on Daniel. And his income was now frozen while the investigation played out. The expensive dinners, the weekend getaways, the shopping sprees, all gone overnight. I ran into one of her old friends, Melissa, at the grocery store. She hesitated before approaching me, but eventually said, "I'm sorry about everything, Ethan. You didn't deserve that." "How's Claire?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Melissa sighed. "She's not doing great. Daniel's barely speaking to her, and she had to move into a 1-bedroom apartment downtown. She's been asking people for help with rent." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and moved on. Inside, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and detachment. I wasn't happy she was struggling, but I also wasn't going to pretend she hadn't earned it. The divorce process moved quickly, thanks to Margaret's efficiency and the sheer amount of evidence we had. Claire didn't even try to contest most of it. In the end, she walked away with only the personal belongings she'd had before the marriage. No house, no savings, no share of my retirement account. A few weeks later, Jake sent me a screenshot from Instagram. It was a photo of Claire at some cheap-looking bar, captioned with a half-hearted inspirational quote about starting over. The woman in the photo didn't look like the confident, put-together Claire I had once known. Her smile was strained, her eyes tired. Meanwhile, I was doing better than I had in years. I'd started running again. spending weekends with friends, and even getting interest from recruiters at rival companies. It felt like the universe was slowly righting itself. The last I heard, Daniel had officially been terminated. His professional reputation was shredded, and with his divorce pending, he was looking at losing a good chunk of what was left of his wealth. Claire, from what I could gather, was no longer in his life. She bet everything on him and lost. I didn't need to see her again. I didn't need an apology. Watching her world unravel from a distance was closure enough. But the final chapter in my story wasn't about her. It was about me and the life I was building without her shadow hanging over it. By the time spring rolled around, my life barely resembled the wreckage Claire had left behind. The house felt different now, brighter, quieter, mine. I'd repainted the living room, replaced the heavy drapes Claire liked with lighter curtains that let the morning sun flood in. It was a small change, but every time I saw that light, it reminded me I was free. I'd accepted a new job at a competing firm. The offer came through 1 week after I left my old company, and with Daniel gone, there were no awkward questions about why I'd left. In fact, my resignation email had somehow found its way to one of the hiring managers, and they'd call me principal during the interview. I didn't correct them. They weren't wrong. Outside of work, I started saying yes to things I put off for years. A weekend hiking trip with Jake. Dinner with my parents just because. I even took a solo road trip down the coast. No schedule, no one to answer to. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. One Saturday morning, I walked into a dealership and bought myself the car I'd always wanted, a sleek midnight blue Mustang. Jake called it my revenge ride, and maybe he was right, but for me it was more than that. It was a reminder that I could make big decisions for myself by myself and not have to explain them to anyone. Claire's name rarely came up now. Most mutual friends had quietly chosen sides, and from the sound of it, she wasn't doing well. She'd bounced between jobs and was apparently living in a much smaller place than she'd ever imagined for herself. Daniel was long out of the picture. But the thing is, I didn't care anymore. The satisfaction I'd felt watching her downfall had faded into something calmer. Indifference. She was just another person from my past now, like an old classmate I barely remembered. One night, I sat on my back porch with a beer in hand, the cool spring air carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from the yard. My phone buzzed with a text from a woman I'd met recently. Someone kind, grounded, and refreshingly straightforward. We were planning to grab dinner the next day. I smiled to myself, realizing how far I'd come since that night in the dining room when my life had been torn apart in front of everyone I knew. That birthday had been the worst day of my life. But looking around now, I realized it had also been the start of something better. I'd lost a marriage, yes, but I'd gained freedom, self-respect, and the unshakable knowledge that I could rebuild no matter how hard I'd been hit. And that, I thought, was worth celebrating. It's been a year since that birthday dinner, the one that ended my marriage in front of family, friends, and anyone unlucky enough to be sitting at that table. At the time, it felt like my world had been ripped apart in an instant. But now, looking back, I realize that night didn't destroy me. It set me free. I've learned that betrayal doesn't just come from the act itself. It's in the way someone can look you in the eye, knowing what they're doing, and still pretend to love you. Claire didn't just cheat. She planned her exit with someone she knew would hurt me the most, and she chose my birthday to deliver the final blow. That wasn't an accident. That was cruelty. But here's the thing about cruelty. It has a way of circling back to the person who dishes it out. Claire thought she was trading up, that she'd walk out of our marriage and into a better life. Instead, she ended up with nothing. Daniel thought he could have my wife, my respect, and my silence. Instead, he lost his job, his reputation, and his marriage. I didn't need to scream, smash things, or make some dramatic public scene. The best revenge I found was quiet, calculated, and impossible to undo. I froze her access to money, secured my assets, and shined a light on their lies. Then I stepped back and let the fallout happen naturally. The most surprising thing? Once the dust settled, I didn't feel the burning satisfaction I thought I would. Yes, there was a moment, several moments, actually, when I felt vindicated watching them face the consequences. But over time, that feeling faded and was replaced by something better: peace. These days, I wake up in a home that feels like mine again. I work at a job I actually enjoy. I have friends who stuck by me and new people in my life who only know me as the man I am now, not the one who was betrayed. My life isn't perfect, but it's honest, and that's more than I can say for the marriage I left behind. If there's one thing I tell anyone going through something similar, it's this: you can't control how someone treats you, but you can control how you respond. Don't waste your energy begging for answers or chasing closure from someone who shattered your trust. Put that energy into protecting yourself, into building a life so strong that their absence doesn't leave a hole. Revenge can feel good, but healing feels better. And sometimes, the two go hand in hand. So no, I don't celebrate my birthday the way I used to. I celebrate it differently now, not as the day my marriage ended, but as the day I started over. And that's the best gift I could have given myself.